So today's video, we're going to be talking about plastic, which is going to be chilling here for the whole video. So I just wanted to say that this series is kind of going to go in a certain order because I wanted to cover the topic of plastics, since most often plastic waste and climate change end up getting linked together, and there's a reason for it, which we will get to in later videos. But today I just wanted to give an overall of the history of how we got to where we are with plastics. So please enjoy, and I hope you learned something. So our story begins sometime before 600 BCE. Shout out to my Mesoamericans, the Aztecs, the Olmecs, the Mayans. I didn't see anything about the Incas, but I wouldn't doubt if they were also in this group. But they were the first to process natural rubber. And they did this by harvesting latex from rubber trees and mixing it with juice from glory vines. And by using different proportions, they were able to create rubber with different types of properties. It's thought that they used the more bouncy rubber to play their legendary Mesoamerican ball games, which were very well respected and obviously had some religious connotations to them. Usually it was one side playing good and the other side playing evil. Some versions of the game even ended in human sacrifice, most famously a ritual of decapitation, which we're not going to get into today. But scientists from MIT have since tried to recreate the processes that they used, and they found out that the 50-50 blend of the ingredients results in rubber with maximum bounciness, so probably what they used for those ball games. And if you change the proportion slightly to 25-75, the substance becomes more durable. So now let's fast forward to the 19th century, which 19th century, let me just say my people were pretty smart. So this is when Thomas Hancock created the first British rubber industry. He was the first to patent vulcanization of rubber in 1821, which he did by heating rubber with sulfur. He was known for patenting the early elastic fabrics like gloves and suspenders, shoes and stockings. However, one of his chief inventions was the masticator, which helped shred mass rubber scraps into blocks where they could be rolled into sheets. So around this same time-ish, an American self-taught chemist also developed a vulcanized rubber. He actually discovered this by mistake, and I don't know what was actually happening around this time, but he accidentally dropped Indian rubber into sulfur on a hot stove. I don't know what was happening that he had sulfur on a stove, but so he thought he was the first to discover vulcanization, and he was granted his first patent in 1844, but had to fight numerous infringements in court, and they did not come to a decision until 1852. He then went to Europe, where his patent was being used, and unsuccessfully tried to establish factories. He actually ended up losing his patent rights in France for technical and legal problems, and in 1855 was imprisoned for debt in Paris. And in the US, his patents were still being infringed upon, and then he died with a debt of $200,000. Now, around this time, in 1841, Alexander Parkes, who was a British chemist, discovered the process of cold vulcanization. And in 1856, he produced a material called Parkinson, which was made from materials found in the cell wall of plants. He initially marketed it as a replacement for rubber, since it was moldable, transparent, and it maintained its shape after cooling. Then in 1863, John Wesley Hyatt invented cellulose nitrate, also referred to as celluloid. This was a significant discovery because he came upon it by motivation of a New York firm who was offering $10,000 to anybody who could find a substitute for ivory, since the popularity of the game billiards, also known as pool, put a damper on the natural supply. And so this invention kind of remade the limits of what humans could manufacture, because this is the first time that we were creating something out of new materials that were not natural. Then in 1872, Eugen Baumann created the first PVC, or as we know them, polyvinyl chloride, and in 1894 Charles Frederick Cross and Edward John Bevan invented viscose rayon, but these were still only semi-synthetic. So they had some natural aspect to them and they had some synthetic aspect to them. This wasn't like the plastic that we know today so far. So the next big game changer came when Leo Baekeland, a chemist who helped found the current plastic industry with his invention of Bakelite, which I hope I'm saying that right. It's either Bakelite or Bakelite. Those are the only two pronunciations I can think of, but I'm just going to say Bakelite. So Bakelite is a trademark of phenyl formaldehyde resin. It is a hard, infusible, and chemically resistant plastic. It was the first commercially produced synthetic resin, representing a significant advancement considering all other materials I talked about included the manipulation of a natural material. And this was trademarked in 1907. Literally, I can't say this enough, 1907 is where everything began, because prior to this, plastic was not commercially used. It served several purposes, but it wasn't until they discovered more of the synthetic plastics that it really took off. It started with things like telephone handsets, and then it grew to other things like engine parts. And then in 1937, polyurethane was invented, and that was a flexible foam that began to be used as packaging, as peanut packaging, or packaging peanuts. Packaging peanuts, sorry. And then in 1939, nylon was invented, and then came polyester, and then next thing you know, we were starting to be introduced to a lot more plastics. But then World War II happened, and this is when plastic production really shot up. So the reason for the popularity of plastic during this time was because all of the natural resources were being allocated towards the war efforts. So consumers were left at home with either having to ration the items that they had, or they had to just go without them. So manufacturers began to look at synthetic plastics because they realized that it was the best alternative. And so this is how plastics were more introduced into the household, and they kept their popularity even after the war ended. But it wasn't until the 1950s when it like boomed. And that's when the Time magazine was promoting this lifestyle. They started marketing it as cheap and disposable, and I believe it was either Times, I think it was Times magazine, I'll insert a picture here, was literally promoting this like disposable lifestyle. And you can just, you're looking at it, you know what I'm, like they were making it sound like the luxury, like what we think, and I hate using this analogy, but like what we think the Kardashians lifestyle is, like that's what plastic was, like, you know, luxury and like money was associated with using plastic, disposable plastic. So that's when it really started to become a bigger thing. And in 1979, the plastic production in the US actually exceeded that of steel. That is where I'm going to conclude the history of plastic for today. Next, we are going to talk about, you see that number right there? It's a number 1. We're going to start talking about the different types of plastics out there, and then we're going to continue on from there. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope that I taught you something today. And don't forget to go outside and hug a tree. Show them some love. I'm going to hug a mocha because I don't have a tree nearby. Mocha, come here. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time. So bye.